It is a distinct privilege for me to introduce our next speaker, who I've known, I think now for 49 years. And he's currently the Senior Executive Vice President of Global Operations for Jabil. At one time, it was known as Jabil Circuit. His mother was actually employee number 250. He's now responsible for operations globally and performance of Jabil's over 200,000 employees in 100 sites across 30 countries. I don't know how he does it, because from one week to the next, he's either in China or Mexico or somewhere in between. JJ drives Jabil's commitments to exceptional execution, quality, and high standards. He has a master's and executive MBA from the Warrington College of Business at the University of Florida. And I'm proud to say he's my little brother. I'd like to welcome to the stage JJ Creedon.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. So, as Beverly said, I run global operations for Jabil. It's a big company. I'm really proud of it. Both of my parents worked at Jabil on the production floor. I worked at Jabil. I started at 20 years old on the production floor as well. So we call it the biggest family business in the world. It's not just me. Our CEO's sons work at Jabil, family members across the company. So we really do treat it like a family business, and it's important for us. It's in all the factories that we have, 100 factories across the world, the 250,000 people that we have, we treat as family members. It was interesting for me, when I was growing up, my mom started working at Jabil, or our mom, when I was about 10 years old. She'd just come home every day and complain about work, complain about supervisors, manufacturing managers, issues that weren't getting resolved. And so unknowingly, she trained me to be a manufacturing manager from the age of 10. It worked out really well. I started when I was 20, started on the production floor, was a supervisor for about 30 people then, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to treat people. I had no idea, just coming out of 2 years of college, what to expect. But the one thing that I always thought about, and I think helped me, was that I decided to treat every woman like she was my mother, every man like he was my father, because they both worked on the production floor. And within about a year or two, I was their boss. And then with about 3, 4, 5 years, I was their boss's boss's boss. But that kind of helped me to be successful in the company. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. I'm not an architect. I'm not sure how I can connect the story for you, but what I'd like to talk about is what's important for us, kind of the trends in the industry that we're seeing. We have a huge footprint. We have a lot of scale. So it's really important from a real estate standpoint, from an architectural standpoint, from a design standpoint, that we can work design elements in, technology elements in, the flexibility that we need to kind of continue to grow the company. When I started, we were a $500 million company when I started. Today, we're a $35 billion company. I was employee number 2,200. Today, we have about 250,000 employees. We actually hire about 500,000 people a year because of the product life cycles that we have for our customers. So that's a pretty tough task. We've got about 50 million square feet across the world, and we've got 400 top-tier customers, and it's anyone you can think of, like the Apples of the world, the Teslas of the world, Ford, Cisco, Zebra, I mean, on and on and on, all types of technologies that I'll show you. Huge piece of complexity is 27,000 supply chain partners that we have to deal with. So it gives us a unique insight into a lot of different industries, a lot of different raw materials, intermediate materials, full assemblies. We build everything from electronics that I'll show you to large form factor windmills. We have a tenured management team. So our CEO's been around for more than 20 years. Our chairman, and right now he's an executive chairman, has been around for more than 30 years. When I look at the leadership team that we have in the company, everyone has been around for more than 10, 15, 20 years. So these are people that I kind of grew up with. They grew up with me, and we work really well together. And as you see the complexity of the company, you'll understand why that's important. We've got factories all throughout the United States, more than 25 facilities in the US. We've got facilities in Canada, very large facilities in Mexico, Guadalajara and Chihuahua, smaller ones in Monterrey, Juarez, Tijuana, Baja, a couple factories in Brazil, all throughout East and West Europe, and North and South Asia. So quite a diverse set of factories. What I'm really proud of is that if you go into each one of these facilities, they're operated and managed by indigenous local employees. So I think that gives us a home field advantage. When we look at our factories, we're not a US company. We're a US domiciled company, but we're a local company. Local teams build relationships with the community. They build relationships with the local government. It gives us an unfair advantage, I think, to a lot of other industries. So we serve all of these markets. I'll talk a little bit about some of the macro trends that are affecting what we do today. But the market trends, you can imagine, are pretty impactful for what we do. We build everything from the backbone infrastructure for the internet. We build cloud infrastructure for very large groups like AWS and others. We build the equipment that makes silicon microchips. So we're making all of the silicon processing equipment. We do things like print and retail. Optics is growing, and if you think about optics, we bought a portion of Carl Zeiss a few years ago, and that helped us with optic alignment of radar sensors for self-driving cars. So one of the big trends, market trends anyways, that's helping buoy Jabil, and we're at an all-time price high recently, is that we are embedded deeply with EV companies. US domiciled, European companies, and Asian companies, a lot of companies in China. And if you're paying attention to the news and what's going on with EV, the China markets have far surpassed the US markets today. And the European markets actually have much bigger aspirations for EV deployment than the United States does. So we're kind of playing in all those fields. Healthcare is a huge growing industry for us as well. We have defense and aerospace business in Florida, in St. Petersburg, Florida. We do consumer packaging, goods, and consumer devices. So probably things that are in almost every one of your pockets, we made in our factories, whether they were in US, Mexico, Europe, or China. So if you think about the full production life cycle, you can think of it from an end-to-end standpoint. We call it design to dust. So we play inside of this life cycle for all of our customers. But if you think of this as a bell curve, the bulk of our work is inside the manufacturer, the source and plan. That source and plan would be with the 27,000 supply chain partners I talked about. Manufacturing of the product and delivering the product to either our customer or end customers, last mile delivery and installation, all the way through to reclamation eventually and recycling of material. And then if you think about our capabilities, they're pretty broad as well. We have, when I say mechanics, we probably have 25,000 CNC machines in the company. We have one factory with more than 15,000 CNC machines in one factory. And if you know how big a CNC machine is, it's a pretty impressive scale. Our largest factories are 4 to 5 million square feet, and our smaller factories are just 50,000 square feet. But we build mechanics. We have thousands of injection molding machines throughout the company. We make medical devices, single-use implantables. As part of the mechanics process, we make artificial joints. So we make everything that you can possibly think of. We're a contract manufacturer. If we have the capability, then we can provide value for our customer. It's a pretty good relationship. Customers more and more want to outsource manufacturing. They want to design products. They want to be product companies. They want to be software companies. They don't want to deal with devices. And that's what we do. So I think I'm talking about it and talking about our company's capabilities and kind of the scope and scale so you have an idea of where our industry is going and maybe how you can help us from an architectural design standpoint. I'm not an expert in that field. Actually, I brought John Matzke, and he'll help me in Q&A in case you have any real tough questions for me. But he runs all of our global facilities, all of our global real estate, global insurance, and global security, which I'm lucky enough to represent for the whole company. Automation, I'll talk a little bit more about AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning. But there's a lot of hype today because of ChatGPT, which is pretty awesome, and I was looking up what I should say to architects. But the hype is there, but this hype is new. AI ML is not new. We've been using artificial intelligence in our factories for years, and I'll give you some ideas of the scope of that. Over the past 3 years, we've added almost $8 billion of revenue to the company, and we've shrunk headcount in the company by 20,000. Adding $8 billion, shrinking headcount by 20,000. So all of the efficiencies that we gain out of AI, all the efficiencies that we gain out of automation, these are all linked together, but they're pretty significant and have a huge impact on our company. If you think about it today, pre-COVID, I'd say we were on a journey towards automation. Post-COVID, we're fully into automating our factories. We've got more than 12,500 robots in our company today. A robot could probably displace 2, 3, 4 operators. Our goal is not to eliminate human jobs inside the factories. Our goal is to make sure we can continue to grow the company. We can't get the employees. It's really tough for us to get employees in the United States. It's tough to get them in Europe. It's now tough to get them in Mexico. Believe it or not, it was very tough to get them in China. That's recently changed. I think we're seeing kind of a massive impact inside the Chinese market today. And it's really tough to get employees in South Asia as well. So we can't rely on just hiring people and training people. We've got to be able to offset the turnover and the difficulty and the challenges in the labor market by increasing automation. Automation is really expensive, but it provides faster time to market for our company because it takes one person to train a robot to do multiple jobs that works 24 hours a day. It really is a lower cost, and if we don't have an ROI, a return on investment for an automation process that's less than 2 years, we won't put it in place. So we're not putting in place huge capital investments for 4, 5, 10-year bets. That doesn't work. Huge flexibility in automation today that didn't exist 3 years ago. 3 years ago, if you wanted to automate some type of assembly, it was designed for use. You spent a couple $100,000 or a couple $1 million, use it for one product family, and then you basically discarded it at the end of the product life cycle because it's not redeployable, it's not reusable. Problem with that is that product life cycles are shrinking really, really fast. So we're making a phone today. I can tell you that phones change every year, right? Everyone has a new phone every year. We completely retool processes every year. 1.5 million fixtures to build one phone. Fixtures. We have to go design and build all those fixtures as well. So automation, now that the technology has shifted, has moved kind of more mainstream, it's more flexible. We can use it across multiple product families. We can redeploy it. So automation and our automation capability is kind of a core tenant, core capability for our company now. And you'll also see automation, and I'll show you a couple of real short videos as I'm speaking. And the automation goes way beyond just assembly, but it's warehouse automation. It's movement of materials. It's automated receiving of goods from the 27,000 vendors that we have. It's automatic shipping. And then you think about all the jobs in between around scheduling. Remember the old traveling salesman problem? Like, that was impossible to solve. The traveling salesman problem was really easy. It was one traveling salesman. What's the easiest path to go through the United States in 30 stops? That problem was really, really tough to solve. Computers couldn't solve it. We do that times 10,000 in the factories every day now. So I'll talk a little bit about our AI capability, but we break it down into 3 pillars. One is computer vision. Why computer vision? Because we have over 20,000 people that inspect product in the company. And on top of the 20,000 people we have inspect product, we have thousands and thousands of pieces of automation gear that inspect product. Advanced analytics and intelligence. So this is really around process optimization. We have a lot of machines. I said we had thousands and thousands of CNCs. If the machines have a problem, if we don't know that they have a problem, if we're not paying attention to the maintenance cycles, if we're not listening to how the machines are performing, we get really inefficient really quickly. So what AI allows us to do, and machine learning allows us to do, is be able to predict how the environment and the variables are affecting the product that we're building, and allow the machines to actually make self-adjustments so they can help self-heal the process. So this sounds like futuristic assembly capabilities. It's not. It's here. We've been doing it for years, and we're deploying it across really, really large pieces of the company. And then knowledge and language processing. So ChatGPT, this is where it fits in. It's really exciting. I sit around the breakfast table with my kids, and we do silly things like make poems and songs, and then I sit back and think, holy smokes, the world is going to rapidly shift, and I think people don't really understand how rapidly the world will shift because of AI and ML. I've seen it in our factories. I've seen it in our customers. From a manufacturing standpoint, I think that manufacturing and operations was maybe one of the first early adopters of AI and ML, and it has kind of profound, I'll use Beverly's term, profound changes to the industry. The other thing that it does allows us to hire, retain, train our folks a lot more efficiently than before. And with 200,000 people, with folks who want a career, they want to spend a lifetime at the company like I have. That's what I want to happen. I want to give them an opportunity to have lifelong learning, and this gives us the opportunity. We have over 200,000 best practices in the company. It's impossible for an employee to go search a best practice and redeploy the best practice inside their factory. That's hugely inefficient inside of a company the size of ours. And we constantly go through this balance of, do we centralize the company and have kind of a top-down directive of how we run, or do we decentralize and let each one of the factories work separately? Because that's really, really agile. It's really good for our customers, not so good for our cost performance. We have our manufacturing cost is somewhere in the $9 billion a year range. So we spend $9 billion in cost, and this is labor, factories, power, just manufacturing cost. I believe AI, ML, when we've got it fully deployed across our factories with just kind of the simple concepts that we have today, is going to reduce about $1.5 billion out of that. That's low-hanging fruit. That's pretty easy for us to see and go get, not tough. So how much more is beyond that in the next 18 months, 24 months? It'll be pretty interesting. And then we've got two major stakeholders, plus the communities that we work in, but our employees, which are really at the heart of what we do, the 250,000 people that we have, they're the lifeblood of our company. They want to have lifelong learning opportunities. They want to have lifelong careers. They want us to be leaders in technology. They want to be proud of the brands that we serve. They want us to care about DE&I and sustainability. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. And I'll tell you the biggest detractor in every employee survey I've ever seen is inefficient business processes inside of a company. So what does that mean? It means there's too much bureaucracy. It means it takes too long to get things done and approved. It means I could do my job better if I didn't have corporate or someone trying to tell me what to do. And then our customers, if we weren't really efficient, if we didn't provide cost downs for the products that we build for our customers every single quarter, they would build it themselves. Why would they go to an outside manufacturer? What we have is leverage of scale. We have leverage of technology. We get a unique viewpoint across the entire world. If we put the data together that we gather from every single factory, all the different products we build, all the different governments that we speak with on a regular basis, all the different customers that we see, we have this knowledge database inside of our company that's pretty phenomenal. So the two-way street there is we help our customers with their products, we help our customers with their employee relations, with their government contacts. But the other thing that our customers do for us is they tell us where to go build. We don't tell them where to go build. We'll talk about the regionalization piece of this and the geopolitical piece of this and the macroeconomic piece of it and the supply chain and logistic piece. But it's really important that the products are built now where they're consumed, because that's the lowest tax tariff, logistics, interrupted area that we can build in. And the other thing our customers want is they want us to be a sustainability partner too. So, sustainability, DE&I is not just important to our employees, it's also important to our customers. And then, look, I told you about this. It's constant balance. It's a shift. It's a pendulum swing. A few years ago, we were a completely decentralized company. All of our divisions that you saw, all the different market segments that we served were independent. They had their own operations teams, their own sales teams, their own finance teams. A few years ago, we said that's just totally inefficient. There's no leverage of scale. We're not aggregating and innovating our best practices. We're not kind of pulling together the best of the company. Our customers are really happy, but they see the inefficiency. Our customers are really happy, but they want technology capabilities that we have that are in other parts of the company brought to bear for them. So we kind of swung the pendulum back to a more centralized model where we get efficiency of scale, but that'll slow things down. So we're trying to make sure that we don't over-pivot to centralization and cost avoidance, but we make sure that we're serving our customers really well and we're agile. And the agility piece is, I'll talk about more when I talk about the architectural piece of this, but it's important. So what's it mean for us and what's it mean for the future of Jabil's manufacturing? We focus on 4 core metrics, and they're not that difficult, but it's safety first, employee safety first. And that means that everybody comes to work and goes home in exactly the same condition every day. There's no injuries, there's no mental issues. We protect our folks, we give them an opportunity. Quality of our product, delivery of our product, and cost of our product. We do it through embedding operational excellence, realizing superior asset management, so hyper-utilizing all the equipment that we have, the hundreds of millions of dollars, the 50 million square feet, and then delivering predictable manufacturing. This is the enablement of AI and ML into the facilities. So look, how can architecture and design enable our global strategy? Well, I explained the centralized versus decentralized. If you walk into any Jabil facility in the world, they kind of feel the same. They kind of look the same, but they're not the same. We don't build them with the same specifications. We don't build them with the same materials. We're constantly updating with how technology moves forward, which we need to do, but they're not exactly the same. So every building is designed differently, leveraging best practices, but it's not cookie cutter. So there's an awful lot that goes into it. The macro trends around the whole company and the business, not the market trends, not the geopolitical, not the economic side. Flexibility and agility, because of the speed of product lifecycle changes now, because of, and I'll give you an idea of this. Car product platforms are 10-year platforms. And it usually takes a couple years to introduce electronic parts for a car. Today, with EVs, the life cycle of a car is only 2 to 3 years. And it takes us a couple months to introduce a new product, design, test, and start manufacturing at full volume the major components of a car. And then we have to shift and do it all over again and retool the entire factories, retrain all of our folks, and then a whole new supply chain on top of it. So that's important. The digitalization automation piece, the localization piece, and the sustainability and wellness, these are items that hopefully as architects you can grasp and help companies like mine or help Jabil with our core responsibility with our shareholder requirements and to do better. Jabil we only make 5% margin. And by the way, it's considered really good in the industry. It's 5% margin on $35 billion of business. And our market valuation is the highest it's ever been at 5%. So if we make small mistakes, if we're not really, really efficient, if we're not focused both on the short and long term, that just doesn't work. So with flexibility and agility, you've seen it. Talk a little bit about changing work patterns and focus on hybrid work. I'm really happy to see all of the articles that are out now by experts that hybrid work is not that effective. I think during COVID, we convinced ourselves it was effective, but coming out of COVID, now we're seeing it's certainly not. It's certainly less efficient. Digital integration, and then rapid shifts in business demand. This is our corporate headquarters in St. Pete, Florida. It was designed by Gensler. It's a really cool space. We started building just before COVID. The building was completed during COVID. Lucky or unlucky about timing, it allows us to change some of the layout of the facility to get us ready for hybrid co-working flexible space. It's designed modularly so that we can change the facility if we need to. We'll talk a lot about that, but our factories have to be, our buildings have to be, our corporate headquarters have to be flexible. This is not like a video that we need to sit and talk through, but I just want to show some of the different things that go on in our facilities as I'm explaining them. But if you think about digital twin, you think about simulation technology, before we spend any money on equipment, before we spend any money on a facility, we create a digital twin, a digital model of it, and we run it through thousands and thousands of simulations across lots of different variable changes to understand where we need to make changes and how we need to shift the business. We talk about the pendulum between centralized and decentralized, and your ability to really capture and aggregate innovation versus leverage scale. I mean, we have to balance both. There's no way to do it without going in and using simulation technology. This allows us to have the optimal material flow, as us use connectivity and data from our machines, parametric data, to go make decisions. And then the other thing that it allows us to do is use AR/VR technology from factory to factory to factory, from corporate to our factories, to make sure that we've got consensus on how to move forward with these massive spending projects. These are two new buildings that are they're being built today. So we're building about a 600,000 square foot facility in Croatia. This is a greenfield. I was just there with John Matsky a couple months ago, and it was a farm. And then a huge factory in Chihuahua, Mexico. So Croatia would be about 600,000 square feet. Chihuahua is about another 350,000 square feet on top of the 1.5 million square feet we have there today already. So if you look at the space on the outside of Croatia, it doesn't quite look like a big box building or a warehouse, but it certainly has the capability to be transformed into one, or a 3PL, built to the specifications with ceiling heights, 33 feet, the exact specs that a 3PL would need if the business model doesn't work in Croatia. If there's some rapid shift in geopolitical strategy from Croatia, they just moved into the euro and Shenzhen, but we don't know how that's going to work out. There's a lot of variables there. So we want to make sure that we've got redeployability of those assets, whether it's inside of Jabil or whether it's for another company where they can add economic value to Croatia and to that local community there, so they're not damaged by Jabil if something changes in the business environment. The Chihuahua factory, the same thing. This factory will be fit up. We'll have about half of that square footage that you see will be office space. It'll have engineers and buyers and planners and managers and customer service folks will be in there. But at the end of the day, if we need to turn it back into a box, we can turn it back into a box. So we've got to think about the work environment. How do we make sure that our folks are happy, they're safe, they're protected, but the assets are still leverageable for the long term? And how do we make sure that we're using them, hyper-utilizing them? Because at a 5% margin business, we can't have a bunch of underutilized capacity. A big focus on sustainability and wellness. And this is really important for our folks. We want to keep them safe. We have commitments to the environment. We have commitments around greenhouse gas emissions, commitments around water consumption reduction, zero waste to landfill, and then keeping our people safe. We'll talk about that over and over. How do we reduce impact and operational costs? We've moved to all sustainable recycled furniture, creating spaces. That doesn't look like a factory space, right? That's the Croatia atrium as you walk into the building. So we're not just building box factories that smell really bad, dirty, and not presentable because you can't keep employees in those spaces anymore. It's not just for that. They're not safe in them. It's not just for that. That's not very sustainable. But a lot of natural lighting, LED, low-cost solutions, and you'll see more about how we generate power and the sustainability pieces of that. This is the corporate headquarters, the inside atrium as well. This building kind of pains me because we're a 5% margin company. Customers are very sensitive to what we charge them. There's a constant negotiation about, fractions of pennies on parts. We're building millions at very low cost, and then you walk into and see this giant headquarters that we have. Sometimes it's hard to explain to our customers, but then we have to go through the logic behind it, the sustainability piece of it, the health and safety, well-being piece of it, the employee retention piece of it, and why we can provide value that's better than our competitors, a business offering that's better than our competitors that gives them a long-term relationship. We have relationships in our company that are 50 years old. We've been building products for companies for 50 years. We help launch companies like Cisco. I think we're their first contract manufacturer. They're far bigger than Jabil is today, but we were part of that growth story for them. Waste and water management. Almost every one of our large factories recycles their own water. We treat our own water. We don't put that burden on the local environment. We don't put the burden on the local cities. They don't have the infrastructure to be able to house a 20,000, 30,000, 40, 50,000 person factory. So it's really important that we take care of the local communities. And then prioritizing well-being. All of our factories have gyms. They all have recreational areas. They all have green areas where folks can go outside, spend their break time, recreate together. Many of our facilities around the world have dormitories where folks live on site. Doesn't happen in the US or Europe, but it happens a lot in Asia, both North and South Asia. And these are what some of the spaces look like. I had just spent 2 weeks in the factories in China. I was there for 14 days last month, traveled to 11 different cities, and the management team, ate in the cafeteria with our employees in every single site. I mean, that's the type of stuff that we do to make sure that folks are well taken care of. And then the other thing that we're really looking for is for you to help us maximize our government incentives. So from a design standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint, from a government engagement standpoint, I think what you can do is leverage government incentives for companies to a much larger degree than they do today. And this is something that, for us, is providing kind of a huge value back. It's not making Jabil more profitable. We're still a 5% company. But what it's doing is providing value back to our customer base, and ultimately the consumers pay less for products, and hopefully we can move products back to other regions like in the United States and manufacture back here again. I told you we have 25 facilities, but they're small. They're really small facilities. I think our biggest one in the US has about 1,000 people in it. Our biggest facilities around the world have 15, 20, 30, 40,000 people. Digitalization, automation. Look, we use digitalization automation for almost everything now. I told you from a digital twin standpoint, something that we've embraced and you probably should embrace as an industry as well. But we have AI-enhanced security across all of our factories. So we have to think about the design of security. To give you some ideas too, customers are very punitive. We're building the next generation of something. And we have thousands of people inside a facility. We can't let anything escape. You can't let a picture escape, or a drawing, or a part, God forbid a part escapes and gets out on the market. You read about it, hey, here's the next generation of whatever. Could you imagine the next generation of iPhone leaking out? That's not very good. There's a huge punitive contractual issue for our customers when that happens. But we can now track. I think one of the cool things about AI and ML with security is that we can track if they're wearing their personal protection equipment. If they're supposed to wear a hard hat and they're not, it alarms. If they're supposed to wear gloves or eyeglasses and they're not, it alarms. It at least gives us an indication that there's a problem and then go back and address it. So we're not waiting for folks to get injured. We're starting to use AI to tell us when that's happening. By the way, that factory down the bottom, that bottom left factory, that's about a 6 million square foot facility in China. We're using a lot of different technologies with AI to enhance our energy efficiency. This is retrofitting old buildings, but also designing for and simulating for new buildings. This allows us to make sure that the equipment is operating efficiently, so we're not wasting energy, so that we're not burning up equipment and having to replace it, that we're maintaining it properly. Smart grid management, this ensures that we're properly switching the electrical flows inside of our factories. We use huge amounts of power. And then, by the way, we make all this stuff too. The smart grid products, the electrical components. You know, we could make a little cellular phone, or we make a 40,000-pound backup battery or a grid-level battery for electrical companies. Automated material movement. The things I want you to see kind of in this picture are, the center picture is a row of CNC machines. So imagine a factory with several thousand of these. It used to have 1, 2, or 3 operators at each machine to change out fixtures, to change out tooling, to add coolant, to change out parts. We now use automation to go do all that. That's what you see, the little white robots. So we've got to design in aspects for that. How do we keep our people safe? We still have people. We're still moving a lot of product. How do we make sure we have good barriers and design elements keep our folks safe? The robot in the top right of that screen, that's a giant ABB robot. You can see the person that's all the way in the right side of the screen for a scale standpoint. These are giant robots that we have inside of facilities to lift heavy pieces of equipment or product. And we do that so that we don't injure employees as well. One of the main issues we have with safety is move-in materials throughout factories. So how do we design the physical infrastructure in the workflow? How do we make sure there's clear pathways and traffic flows? How do we stay flexible and move quickly? What are the environmental factors that we've got to consider? And by the way, it has to be less than a 24-month ROI, because you can't pay for automation gear and have the possibility that you can't get your return on the investment if there's a major shift in product family, if there's a major shift in customer base, or there's a major shift in some geopolitical aspect where we can't export the investments that we have inside the factories. And that happens. And then leveraging vertical storage space. I think that, if you think about, we talk about square footage, we have 50 million square feet, but 50 million square feet times about 33 feet will tell you the cubic feet that we have inside the company. I don't know what that number is. But we have to leverage vertical space as well. So if you go into our factories now, what you'll see is vertical space is used because automation's at a point where it has the capability and the cost that we can install automated storage solutions in all of our factory warehouses. It's a big deal. So what you're seeing in that video is that this is automated storage of WIP, work in process. So these are materials that are in some state of build. This never would have happened 3 years ago. We never had the capability of technology. The ROI wasn't there. The vendors, the reliability wasn't there. The power infrastructure wasn't there. And labor was way cheaper than automation solutions or the cost leverage of our square footage. So those things all changed kind of through COVID. We'll see how they continue to shift as we're out of COVID now. But I don't see them getting much better unless there's just a major macro meltdown. And then localization, you read in the news, and I talked about the geopolitical aspects of it. It's way cheaper to build products, assemble products closer to where the products are consumed. So that's bringing a lot of production back to the United States, a lot of production back to Mexico, a lot of production back to Europe. There's a cost savings on the logistics piece, but labor is not even close. So that's why you don't see all of it come back. And I think that one of the things that I worry about is intermediate materials. So we can move all this assembly back to the United States and try and pull it out of China, but they control the intermediate material flow and they control the raw materials. They've got the rare earth elements. We have them in the United States, we just don't mine them up, but they have them readily produced now. They have intermediate materials, meaning microchips, meaning caps, resistors, capacitors, resistors. All the things that you use to build electronics, they exist in China. They don't exist outside of China. So if they've got a stranglehold on intermediate materials and we're not playing real nicely and we put the CHIPS Act in place and we totally cut off everything that goes on from a silicon standpoint, they've got a ton of leverage over us as well. I talked about the local market knowledge and our indigenous folks running factories around the world and the partnerships that we have. We're constantly looking at footprint optimization. I know that factory space, real estate, it's not a variable expense in our company. It's not a variable expense in any company, but it's becoming increasingly important that it's variable, that we can shift the use case for the buildings, that we can cohabitate or co-locate with other companies if needed, and that we can shift the usage of the buildings or be able to give it back without having millions of dollars of tenant improvement issues at the end of lease expirations. We own a big percentage of our buildings, but we lease a big percentage of our buildings. I think that's just more kind of accounting engineering, financial engineering than a requirement on our side. But this is something that John Matzke's team does on a daily basis, is try and identify where we have opportunities inside of our 50 million square feet, where we should be trying to point customers next, and where we have opportunities to reduce. Two other factories that we're building right now that were just completed. So we just finished a factory in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is interesting because why would you choose Salt Lake City for manufacturing? But they've got a really technical workforce, and it's also a hub point for distribution for very large, heavy infrastructure, grid-level products to the entire west coast of the United States. And then in Jabil, Guadalajara as well. So I just wanted you to see that the buildings are super flexible. They have to be built so that we can take advantage of the efficiencies of what we do, but they have to be built so that they can be returned to something differently relatively quickly when market conditions change for us. And then the collaboration with the local stakeholders, with the local governments, is super, super important. You know, I think that I said that our factories kind of look and feel the same, but they're not identical. And this is kind of a key point for me as well, as I'm wrapping up, that the factories that we build, the factories that we buy or that we rent or that we lease, we've got to have the local stakeholders have to be first. The employees there, the communities there, the materials that we use, the vendors, and that the partners that we have. You know, this is it's the biggest consideration that we have as we move through new facilities or close other facilities. We wouldn't grow to $35 billion if we were closing factories. So I don't want you to take away that we're closing factories. What I'm telling you is that we repurpose them constantly. We could have a clean room in a factory, a couple $1 million clean room in a factory for 2, 3, 4 years. We could convert it to industrial space with CNC machines or injection molding machines. We could be building medical devices on a piece of property and completely switch it to EVs, electric vehicles, in the next 18 months. So flexibility with the local teams is kind of paramount to what we do. And I guess, in closing, I said this, flexibility and agility with product life cycle shifts that we see, with turnover that we see, with the geopolitical, the macro problems that we see kind of hitting us every single day, and the unique perspective that we get because we serve all these different industries, all these different customers, and all these different end markets, and all these different locations around the world, it continues to come back to flexibility and agility. And we love built for use because it gives us efficiency, but it doesn't really work in the mid to long term for us. We think that companies that can react quickly have the competitive edge, and that's where we see one of our main, I would say, it's an advantage over our competitors. And automation and AI and ML, it's not a fad. If you haven't gone and used ChatGPT, if you haven't thought about how AI and ML is going to affect what you do from an architectural or design or a building standpoint, then I'd tell you that it's probably a good opportunity for you to go take a look at it, because the impact that it's had inside of operations, the impact it's had in manufacturing and product design and the product life cycle is unbelievable. And we've seen it really, really accelerate over the last, call it 24 months. And I think COVID helped drive some of that forward because nobody was going to work and everybody was staying home. We couldn't figure out how to get product built. And you all saw that when you went into stores, you couldn't buy things. You all saw that you had to order cars 12 and 18 months in advance. And that's because the supply chain was so incredibly interrupted because of the employee issues, and then the logistics issues, which are also caused by the lack of employees, that we've all had to go back and retool the entire supply chain to figure out how to do things. And I think automation and AI, it was lucky timing that it was in the state it was 18 months ago to allow us, 24 months ago, to allow us to do these things, because we wouldn't have been able to do it 5 years ago. It wouldn't have happened. I think the impact would have been far more dramatic. So that's all I had, and I'm happy to take any questions. I hope that kind of allows you to see into how we look at the macro and the different trends and what opportunities you can have as architects and designers and builders to help us be more successful. I think the opportunity is only becoming greater for you because the building and infrastructure and the human well-being or employee well-being piece is so fundamental to what we do and so important that you've got an opportunity to make an impact for companies like ours, or for us, for our company. So.
Yeah, for her to do one side of the wall.
Any questions? Yes.
Building codes are going to vary quite a bit, you know, in different countries, especially places like Mexico, Brazil, China.
Yep.
So what do you do to make sure that you're looking at your the risk, like from an insurer perspective? Do you lean heavy on your underwriter to get involved and make sure that, you know, certain things, you know, fire protection standards are followed and that sort of thing, or
Absolutely.
because you know, if in Mexico you're not, you know, if you just follow their code, you're not going to get that.
Right. No, so I would say that the local requirements, local government regulations are at a minimum. On top of that, we have expectations from a company standpoint. We have a close relationship with FM Global, close relationship with CBRE, and our customers have a certain expectation as well of how we treat their product and protect their product. I keep talking about our employees. It's not lip service. It's a culture of our company. We don't want to put our employees at risk either. So we require fire suppression, for instance, across all of our factories. And by the way, 1 or 2 incidents a year occur, and it always reminds us of how important it is, because we're able to stop a small room fire from spreading throughout, you know, a facility with 20,000 people in it. It's pretty significant. But no, I would tell you that it's like that's the floor.
Hi, just kind of my question is a bigger scale question. Since you're plugged in China and in India, and you see what's going on, and you made a reference to the smaller factories in the U.S., what do you think needs to happen in the United States for us to stay influential and relevant in this, the way the global market's changing, and it seems like we're losing our influence and our power here?
I don't know how much we're losing influence and power. We do less manufacturing in the United States, but I'd tell you that the majority of really high-value design comes out of the U.S., and many of you see the domiciled companies, the highest value companies in the world are from the U.S. as well. Manufacturing in the U.S. is difficult because the labor rate difference it's massive. So inflation in China is huge. Over the last 10 years, their salaries have probably tripled in the last 10 years, but they're still at about $6 an hour versus $60 an hour in California. So that's a pretty fundamental difference between, just from a cost standpoint. And I'd tell you that in manufacturing, labor is our largest spend item. So if your largest spend is 10 times more expensive, then makes it tough. Sometimes the geopolitical tax tariffs do incent you to do that, though. Sometimes it makes it worthwhile, or logistics. But the labor rates are different. The other thing I'll tell you is that the U.S., from a manufacturing standpoint, has fallen behind, has lost some of our capability and competency. There are countries outside of the U.S. that are, I'd say on average, and normally 30% more efficient than we are in building the exact same product with the exact same equipment, in the exact same layout, with the exact same raw materials. They're 30% more efficient than we are, day in and day out, no matter what we do, no matter how we incent the people. So it's a tough one.
Hello?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was tough. With all the LA port issues, it shut down factories of ours throughout the United States and Mexico for like days and weeks at a time. But every time we have these issues, and this is part of where AI and ML comes into play, we were able to now use an AI and ML, figure out where we have high-risk vendors, high-risk material. And high risk would be we don't have much in stock. There's a single source, comes out of a region that's got high volatility. It's got high logistics costs. You know, we take into account every one of those variables. We see where the issues bubble up, and then we go off and solve those problems. So we'll second source, or we'll drive new vendors, or we'll go to a different geography. And we do that in conjunction with our customers and with our vendors. So it's a shift, right? It's rebuilding nodes of supply chain so you have redundancy and failovers and opportunities to, in the future, not have the same problem that we had with COVID. It's not cheap either. I mean, it's an expensive part of doing business. But the business continuity aspect of it is important for our customers, and they're willing to pay for it. You know, those aren't things that we just go do for free for customers. They're things that provide value, that is a value-added service for them. But the insights that we have across 27,000 vendors gives us an opportunity to do that for our customers. Yeah.
Hi. You mentioned
I might talk to him afterwards.
this shift from a decentralized company strategy, culture, to moving to a centralized model. Now, obviously, this company is huge and has ethnic and company cultures that have to be considered. Can you share what some of your challenges were in making that move?
I think the biggest one is that people just don't like being told what to do. And especially if, you know, you're given all the opportunity to make your own decisions in a factory 100% completely, then having someone say, well, maybe there's a better way to do this, or maybe you should look at this factory and how this factory is designed and where these other opportunities are. It's the human behavior element of it that's the biggest hurdle for us to get over. And that's a knee-jerk reaction that we'll get out of the factories. The other big hurdle is that it adds bureaucracy. It does add bureaucracy. So instead of a factory being able to go off or a business being able to go off and purchase what equipment they want, you know, we put specifications in place, or we put AVLs in place, and we ask that they follow certain processes and procedures. We get a ton of leverage out of things like that, a ton. But the factories, our businesses, every location has to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining. They have to make their own profit. They have to pay their own costs. They have to pay their own employees. We're not a franchise model, but we treat every single node of our company like it's a franchise model. We keep the financials separate. We're able to deep dive into them. It rolls up to the full company. But the leverage that we get out of it far outweighs kind of this human behavior, knee-jerk reaction around folks not wanting to get back to a centralized environment. We want a company of entrepreneurs, but we don't want to redevelop the core processes that you use from factory to factory. You know, every factory has procedures that are used in every other factory. It makes no sense to go redevelop those procedures, have an engineer write new processes and procedures and train them out, create training programs around it, when we do that as a baseline process, factory to factory to factory, right? But those are the kinds of elements that you lose when you decentralize, not because people don't want to be efficient, it's because it's just easier to do it yourself than to go ask your sister factory how they did it. So placing that requirement it's important for us, though. It'll swing back. I have no doubt that in, 4, 5, 6 years, someone will say, man, we've gotten way too bureaucratic. We've gotten way too slow. We saw all this leverage in the factories. We've done the best we can. Go back to a decentralized environment, and we'll see this fragment out again. I think that's what happens, this cycle that we go through. It's unfortunate, but I think it's kind of cleansing, and it's a good part of our business, too. So then as we move back to a decentralized environment, we'll be saying, don't go too far, because if we go too far, we're going to lose leverage. But I'm sure that eventually it'll go back as well. Yep.
Yes, so you alluded to you have 5% profit, so a mind-blowing, very effective company, obviously. Can you give us an idea of what type of analytics and things go into making sure that the built environment is as efficient as it can be, from energy, HVAC, all those kind of elements that you have within a building? Yeah,
that's a good question. John, you want to answer that? Because I think, let me ask John to answer it, because he's got a good answer for this. This is what he does every day for our 50 million square feet.
Hi. So we have BMS systems, so building management systems, and we try to connect as many devices to those BMS systems as possible. And then we set benchmarks, right? We look in the industry, we see what energy usage is, we see HVAC usage, and we always try to optimize, right? So, I mean, it's the biggest thing is getting interconnected devices in that environment, being able to see the data, and then being able to change. Those changes are always smart, and they come with balance, because you don't want to change the airflow or the electrical output to the factory floor, because there's a lot of cascading ramifications to that. But at the same time, it's about collecting data, centralizing it, and just making sure you're making the right decisions. Yeah.
John, would you mind bringing that microphone? We have one last question up in the front. It's a presidential prerogative.
Who has a question?
JJ, thank you for your presentation. I have one last question. What was it like growing up with Beverly?
I'll tell you about Beverly. So Beverly is a super, super intelligent person. I'm not just saying this, but I know this to be true. When we were kids growing up, she used to read, without exaggeration, 4 or 5 books a day, every day. And so I remember that we didn't have much money. My dad was in the military. He was a drill sergeant in the military. My mom wasn't working when we were real young. But I remember just them going to get boxes every week, boxes of books for Beverly to read, and then trading those boxes to get more books. But she was always an artist. I remember growing up and seeing her draw fashion designs, dresses, and just amazing, these amazing designs all over the house of different fashion. And then the other thing I remember about her is that she was always drawing animals, right? Insects and animals and really cool things like that. But she's really thoughtful. We have another sister that's older than Beverly, but I can tell you both my sisters are just really thoughtful, amazing people. I respect them both and love them both so much. We have a great family, and they've married great people. We have great people that have come into our family. So lucky to have them. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love you.